Hello and welcome to the UTINNI Initiative, where we yell UTINNI and take the initiative. Today I'm going to be opening up some packs. These are some packs that I won at our most recent Premier tournament at my local game store. It was a smaller Premier tournament. It was 8 players, but I did end up taking first place, and so I have the winning packs. And so I wanted to open them up here, and we can enjoy them together. And keep an eye out for some good Twin Suns cards. First up, I have what our group affectionately calls the Pop-Tarts. So I accidentally didn't hit record on the camera that was showing my cards. So I did open the first pack already, and I do know the cards in here. First one's Chopper, which I was excited about because I do have a Eternal Spectre deck. Droid Laser Turret, which is kind of like the new Village Protectors. And then Wookiee Gorilla, which I can't remember if it's in one of my Twin Suns decks. But these cards are not the main event. This is just my weekly play promo. For the regular packs, I did open up the first pack, and I saw the leader in the base, but nothing else. So we're going to go ahead and take a look. I know that the leader is Aura Singh. Very nice control leader. I do play her in one of my Twin Suns decks. And it's nice to be able to waste an action with her free ability, and her deploy does matter. However, she's a bit of a placeholder for that Twin Suns deck. I'll probably replace her down the road, but for now, she's decent. I can't complain about her. I talked a little bit about the Epic Action base, which is that they're less good in Twin Suns because of because Twin Suns decks are less consistent. Usually there's key cards you want to ignore aspects on. In a Twin Suns deck, you're not going to hit those cards a lot, and so a lot of times you're not getting the value you want. Those are the only cards I saw, so let's continue with the opening. I did see something interesting in the back. I'm not sure exactly what it was, but first up, we have a Prototype TIE Advance. This is a reprint from Jump to Lightspeed. A Callous Bounty Hunter. I also like the Dead Bith there. Very callous. And then we got the Phoenix Squadron Fighters. This has actually been a pretty good draft card for me. But outside of that, it's kind of rough to make work because it doesn't have any other keywords. The Braca Shipbreaker. This is definitely a card for discard strategies, which I actually don't know how much it would take for those to translate to Twin Suns, because the problem with discard strategies is there's not enough overlap yet. You can only have one copy of a card, so it's like if you have 80 cards, not a lot of them are going to be playing into that discard synergy. I don't know how many sets we're going to need before a discard strategy deck becomes viable in Twin Suns. The Toydarian Technician. This is just a really strong unit for Twin Suns in Cunning and Vigilance because of the Restore 1, but also the fact that it's just got pretty good stats. I also just like Toydarians. Street Gang Recruiter is a reprint from, is it set 1 or set 2? Well, in any case, one of the early sets. I think it might have been set 1, but it also could have been set 2. I don't remember. But you return an Underworld card from your discard pile to your hand. I remember this being in some control lists that would like to return that Bounty Hunter card that's like 6 cost or something, and when you play it, you return an event to your hand, and they would get their like big control card back, like Super Laser Blast, or their Vigilance back or something. So sort of like a little loop they could do. So he's pretty cool. Yeah, I mean, he could see some value in Twin Suns. Corn Contractor, I mean, he's a Sentinel, and he has grit, so I mean, he's going to be pretty good. I think he's perfectly fine for Twin Suns, and I love Corns. Cutthroat Pod Racer, just well statted. Probably something you would play in actually an aggressive villainy Twin Suns list, just because it's decently statted and also like can keep the board clear, because in aggressive decks you want to keep your units on the field and you want to remove enemy units, or at least make enemy units trades into your units terrible, and so this helps with that. The Beach Patrol ATACT, this card having Overwhelm is actually kind of important, because like overwhelm is one of those keywords that um, it's sort of, I think it's underappreciated, especially in a format like Twin Suns, um, because especially for like uh, being able to finish the game. Like you compare this card to something like Reinforcement Walker, for example. This card's got 2 more attack and overwhelm. Reinforcement Walker has the healing potential. Now, Reinforcement Walker generally is still going to be the better card, but I feel like overwhelm is a keyword that's not appreciated enough. Ooh, Hyperfoil Droid Laser Turret. Nice. Yeah, this card is I think this card's a pretty decent Twin Suns card. Obviously, just dies immediately to Aura Sing, the leader in our pack, but still, really nice Hyperfoil. Trade Trust. I'm not going to talk too much about this one, actually. You can think about that. BT1. This one is just a well-statted. I mean, the more 2/4s we get, the less valuable the 2/4 stat line will be, I guess, because it'll become more normalized. But especially for Twin Suns, it's going to take a lot of 2/4 stat lines before we're not, really considering a unit just because of its stats. This is a great aggressive villainy Twin Suns card. However, because it requires the aggression to be the card that you hit for it to deal a damage, it's less good, I guess, in that sense. And also, it's still only dealing 1 damage to 1 ground unit. But I still think this is something you would play. Transmission Jamming. This card, outside of some interesting scenarios, I would say you don't play a card like this in Twin Suns. This is like a sideboard card for certain matchups you don't like in Premier. Twin Suns, I don't think you ever play this in Twin Suns. There might be some weird scenarios where you could. The rare we have is the Conveyance Security Captain. Enemy credit tokens lose all abilities. 3 for a 2/4. Honestly, just a nice solid card. I think it's fine to just put this in any, I would probably say like a control deck or a deck that's looking to go late. It just gives you some value while it's out there. It's in Vigilance, which is generally going to be a color that likes to go for later games. Yeah, really decent card. And then we got, that was the Aura Sing at the bottom. All right, not a bad pack. I really enjoyed the Hyperfoil Droid Laser Turret. All right, now you guys get to see a pack opening because I messed up before. Okay, I said it the last time I opened a pack, but what I like to do is I like to not look at the front of the card right away, because what if it's a showcase? What if it's a showcase? So I am going to just flip it. No showcase, but another hyperspace leader. I can't really be mad about that. We got Hera Syndulla here. She is the new Hera. I have an Eternal deck with the old Hera. So I don't use this one, but I still appreciate that there's another Hera. She isn't really a Spectre leader in my opinion. I mean, she kind of is, but mostly she's like just a light side good stuff leader, at least for later game units, because she ignores the aspect penalties. So you can just play different light side units you like out of aspect as long as you have enough of a board. She's got Restore 1. For Twin Suns, I actually think she's a lot stronger than Premier. I think it's easier to keep units on the board in Twin Suns in some cases, and the Restore is significant. And honestly, being able to ignore aspect penalties on light side units means you just kind of open your deck up to some surprise plays. So I do appreciate this card in Twin Suns. We'll skip the base because I already talked about these bases. First one up, we have Shield Drive Outfitter. This card is actually one I play in one of my Twin Suns decks, and I think it's really good in there. Basically, being able to get a shield token on a unit sometimes is just a really nice little tricky play, especially if you do it on a Sentinel or some unit that's getting a lot of hate. It's basically kind of like a moment of peace, except potentially worse because you need 2 resources to do it, potentially better because you can bounce it and redo it as a when played, and potentially better because, unlike Moment of Peace, Shield Drive Outfitter can be a turn 1 play if you have nothing else to do. So, you know. It also allows you to do some politicking because you can pay 1 and give a shield to like an opponent's sentinel that you don't want to die that round. That is important. Next up, attack from all sides. I really want this card in Hyperfoil. I don't think I have that yet. This is just a really cool art. This is also better in Twin Suns because in a Premier deck, you basically have to be using the ignore aspect base or some other way to ignore aspects or something like that to get the 4 aspects needed, because pretty much generally every Premier deck is going to have only 3 possible aspects generally. To get 4, that's pretty easy to do in Twin Suns. That being said, even though it's better in Twin Suns, direct damage cards like this are a bit rougher, but it is interesting to think about. It's also just a pretty card in full art. Swoop Bike Marauder, this is in one of my Premier decks. I actually think this is a Twin Suns card as well. I think any card that allows you to draw cards repeatedly is something you really want to think about. And this is well statted. This is something that like your opponents can't just easily trade into this, like for example with Watto, for example. So I think it's kind of a significant one. Soliston Sapper. Ambush is important. I do play this in one of my Twin Suns decks. Ambush and Overwhelm allows for some surprise damage potentially, especially like when you have like battle droids on the field. This is without any other additional buffs or shenanigans. This is automatically 3 damage to their base over a battle droid. You know, that's nice. So I do think this is a decent card to look at. Backed by the Huts. This is a Twin Suns card. Like if you're going to do direct damage, I would do direct damage like this because it also just advances your resource state by creating the credit token. You also don't have to deal the damage if you really, really don't want to, if you don't want to make an enemy. But I mean, just if you are going to do direct damage and you're doing credit tokens, this is like, this is a better card to play. I also play this in one of my Twin Suns decks. So Cutthroat Pod Racer, we talked about already. Common Cause. This is one that's, again, a little bit easier to make work in Twin Suns. That being said, generally buffs like this that don't allow you to attack as well, usually you're not, there's too many opponents. So I think a card like this is going to be worse when there's more opponents that are going to be wanting to stop your unit before they attack. Their 3 actions to your 1 action. So I think this is better in 1v1, and even then, I don't think this is that great. If it cost 1, I might have, looked at it differently. This is 4 for a 4/5 Saboteur, the Rebel Blockade Runner. I think that Saboteur is another underappreciated keyword in Twin Suns. Saboteur and Overwhelm are one of the ways you can just get damage to base, or some of the ways you can get damage to base. And this is a decently statted card. It's got Rebel synergies. Yeah, I think you could, if you're playing a Rebel deck in yellow, yeah, why not? Hyperfoil peeking out back there. Hidden Hunters. I mean, I would say it's well statted. You might play this in a Boba deck, the Young Boba. I know there's like 5 different Bobas, but the Young Boba, yeah, you could play this in aggressive like Boba deck. Hyperfoil Soliston Sapper. All right. Cool. I think I packed one of these before, though. Dengar. This is better in Twin Suns, but it also can draw some hate, so, keep that in mind. But basically, when a unit with the highest cost among enemy units is defeated, create a credit token, only once each round, but still, as long as you keep him alive, he's going to generate value almost every turn. He's pretty good. But it's just that 3 health. If he was a 3/4, he'd be so much better, but since he's a 4/3, he's just a little squishy. Terramin. Oh, Andor's such a good show. Terramin, being able to, I think credits are going to be something that will be seen a lot in, especially if they do credits again in a set. I think you're going to see them a lot in Twin Suns because treasure tokens are pretty popular in Commander. So I think Terramin is a card that I think he will age well, I guess is the way to put it. Because he's just a nice ball of stats. Hyperspace, nothing left to fear. One of the best moments in Rebels. And this card is just rough in Twin Suns. It's not that it's terrible necessarily, but paying 5 to defeat one unit that needs you to have a unit with the power. Like, this is just a better... This is a much better card in 1v1. This can, like, swing a game. In Twin Suns, it's a lot for what it does, so... And we got a Jyn Erso. That's our rare for the pack. And Jyn Erso, I think, is a very... if you're in these colors, especially if you're Rebel, Jyn Erso is great. She can exhaust, or she can be just a good first turn play, or she can buff another unit. She doesn't have to give it to herself. Just a really strong play. It's just she's restrictive on colors. But yeah, a really good Twin Suns card. Kind of like the first Leia card. It was a little bit different. It was you either exhausted a unit or you readied a resource when you played her. And she was a 2 for a 2/2. So similar. I think that it depends on the deck. I think probably in most decks, Jyn Erso is probably better. But there are some decks I could see, like if you're using a deck that requires you to pay for your leader ability, like the older Leia Organa, for example, that can give the experience token. That's where a unit like Leia could be a little bit better, but it's still going to be kind of the same as Jyn. So I don't know. I think Jyn's probably better. All right. Let's go ahead. We have Boba and Jyn left. We just packed a Jyn, so let's go ahead and do Jyn next. Okay. Let's see if we got the showcase. Wha-bam! No. But we do have the client. This has been a pretty good draft card for a lot of players in our scene. They have done well with him. He's kind of interesting because there's not a lot of exhaust leaders happening right now. I mean, during like the age of Jango Fett, he came out in set 3, but it was set 4 when he really popped off because of all the other cards introduced in set 4. That, a lot of people were tired of exhaust after dealing with him. But as far as Twin Suns, it is a free action, so it's an easy way to waste an action. Wasting actions is actually quite powerful. I would say he's not a bad secondary leader in a force deck for villainy decks. So because you're going to be creating your token when you attack with your force units, I think that's an easy way to do it. He also combos well with leaders that would care about shields, for example. What would be a good one for villainy? Who cares about shields? Or even experience tokens, like Tarkin, for example. Tarkin can create experience token, or Snoke. Since they create a token, then you can turn on the exhaust. So I don't think he's that viable in Premiere. I think he's too action inefficient in Premiere, but action inefficiency, depending on the deck, is sometimes better in Twin Suns. Now, it's also depending on the situation. Like, for example, Admiral Akbar can exhaust right away by giving them an X-Wing token. He can't. You always have to do something first, which means that generally, like with Akbar decks and Twin Suns, taking the initiative is pretty powerful because they just exhaust the unit they're scared of the most. There you go. But with the client, you can't do that. So I do think he's worse than Akbar because of that. But in some situations, it is kind of important to be able to waste actions. So, and I do see the value, especially with like a force leader. I'll skip the base because it's the base. What's the token experience? No, shield. Okay. All right, let's keep going. Shielded Hauler, 5 for a 4/5 shielded. Yeah, would you play in a Twin Suns deck? I mean, I guess you could. It's got Underworld. It's a transport. There's some keywords in there that might matter, but probably not. And then we got the Cloud Rider Veteran. This card, I think, is better in Twin Suns than it is in Premiere. Because splitting damage is something that actually kind of matters sometimes. Being able to attack one person but deal 2 damage to a different base. So I actually do think there is some value here. The IGV55 listener. This is just a nice Sentinel. Where I think you are going to see this card is in Piet decks. If they have blue, which they almost certainly would have, because that has a lot of capital ships that are pretty nice. So Piet decks love this card in Twin Suns. But also you could just play it in like some control decks. You know, a lot of control decks are probably going to lean into like red-blue villainy and probably either green as well, or you could do yellow. Either one matters. You could even do all 4 colors if you do the right leaders. But yeah, definitely a good card in Twin Suns. Collateral damage, I think, is less good in Twin Suns than in Premier, but it's not terrible. You have a lot more targets with this, so it can get some pretty good value. If 2 players have 2 different units that have 5 attack and 2 remaining health, then this gets rid of a lot of damage off the field. So that's can happen, but generally, yeah. Hey, we got the full art version of it. Not a hyper full, but still, look at that. That's such cool art. Enfys is a really cool character. Expendable Mercenary. This is a Twin Suns card for sure, because who cares if it's not as good as Super Laser Tech? You are looking for redundancy effects, right? You can play 3 Super Laser Techs in your Eternal deck. You can't play 3 Super Laser Techs in your Twin Suns deck, so a card that's a worse Super Laser Tech is still a partial Super Laser Tech. Ramp is something that I think is going to matter the more the game goes on, because I think it depends on how people, it depends on what the types of decks that people build and how they want to play Twin Suns, but essentially I think the games, especially as players play more, will be longer in general. Obviously, if there's an aggressive deck in the mix, it can make the game go a lot faster. But yeah, Expendable Mercenary, great Twin Suns card. Milodon Rider. Having Ambush, I mean, these, like when you get to like 5, 6, 7, 8 resources, Ambush is one of those keywords that I actually think is better in Twin Suns, because sometimes you just need to have something matter right away. When played, you may return another friendly non-leader unit to its owner's hand. This is something that generally is an inefficient play, but in Twin Suns, inefficiency doesn't really matter as much, because there's just more opponents that have to worry about other opponents. It's not just you, right? So when you make an inefficient play, it's less. It's not that big of a deal. So I like Milodon Rider for Twin Suns. Combat Exercise, another play that I think is a card that I think honestly can be pretty good in Twin Suns. It's just a cheap way to buff your unit. Exhausting the unit means that it lowers the threat assessment of it. So I really like that. You just don't want to play this too late, because if you exhaust your own unit and then someone surprises by, has a bunch of surprise damage and takes someone out, then you basically just hurt yourself. So there's the Street Gang Recruiter again. Ooh, Hyperfoil C3PO. Look at that. This card is a great Twin Suns card if you are going to have a bit of a tribal theme, and you don't have to worry about him sharing traits with your tribe, right? You can use him in an Imperial deck, because all he cares about is whether the non-leader unit, and it can't be him, it has to be another non-leader unit. All he cares about is whether that non-leader unit shares a trait with a friendly leader. So really, really nice Twin Suns card. It's weird to think of this as a downside, because in Premier, this wouldn't be a downside. In Twin Suns, I almost wish he wasn't an on attack, but instead just an exhaust, because that way you don't have to poke someone. Anytime you poke someone, it's, you're poking the bear, right? Okay. It's 1 damage, but like they're thinking about that card more. They're thinking, man, I kind of want to kill the C3PO. It poked me for like 2 damage over these past 2 turns. So I think in Twin Suns, this card would be better if he was just an exhaust, like, just action exhaust, and he does that. Kind of like a healthier Bail Organa from set 1? Set 1, I think. Yeah, cool Hyperfoil. Canto Bite Security. This is a great Sentinel for Twin Suns because it ramps you, and probably, again, it's probably a card like this isn't going to ramp you a bunch. It's usually it's probably going to get like 1 or 2 credit tokens, because people want to one-shot this, right? But still, a Sentinel that generates you value and it has like worse stats, that's fine. That's perfectly fine for Twin Suns. Skeen. So Skeen is he is a great card on his own. I would say I wouldn't put him in most Twin Suns decks because sometimes you're just not going to have matchups that are going to use credits. Like it's not like credits are that ubiquitous. They're not like treasure tokens in Magic. So because they're just one set. If they do credits again, they like do multiple sets with credits, then a card like this is going to become more and more important, especially if they do more leaders that make credits. That's really the big thing. Cards that make credits in sets, leaders that make credits, and those are like good Twin Suns leaders. That's where a card like this becomes more important. But he's also an auto include if you have a Vel Twin Suns deck, which I do. So that isn't in one of my decks. We got the Chopper again. This is the art I use. Well, I think I have a Hyper Foil, but this is the art I use for my Eternal Spectre deck. It's a good card. It's very nice. Fear and Dead Men. All right, so this card is the discard synergy card because paying 7 for it is rough, but paying less for it is nice. There is probably a scenario in which a card like this could be in a Twin Suns list, especially as more discard synergy happens and there's like a little bit more potential for combo plays, like being able to discard a bunch of cards from your hand and then like get like a really high value turn, especially if you know it's the last turn or you're going to try to make it the last turn. Maybe, but as it stands now, this card just isn't. It's a card you put in if you really like the art and maybe you're playing like Vader as one of your leaders. It's just a really flavorful, cool card, but generally it's not going to be that great in Twin Suns. It's not really a Twin Suns card. Not really a Twin Suns card. Next up, last pack is the Boba Fett pack. What do we got? What do we got? Oh! Okay, we're fine. No showcase, but I did get Callus. Callus is a Twin Suns card that makes your deck building so much harder. It's weird because you think it'd make it easier, but it makes it so much harder. The card selection's just so vast. You basically can play any cards you want. Especially true, like he makes you want to play heroic cards for the most part because of his flip. So his flip basically says when you play a heroic card, you heal 2 damage from your base. So you generally want your out of aspect cards to be heroic. But if you pair him with like, let's say you pair him with a, what's a good example? Like a Fennec Shand, for example, the new one from Ashes of the Empire. She's a red-yellow leader, and then you have a green base. That means you would have red, yellow, blue, green, and black, just so you can play normally, and then you would be able to play the heroic cards by just paying 1 more. Your deck's just so open. You can just put any card you want out of all the cards that exist. You can even do the double aspect cards, so it just means that really, like, cutting your deck down to either the 80 cards is rough. It's rough, but he is very good. Now, and that's the thing, like this card isn't as good in Premier because paying more for a card usually is just not good in Premier. That value loss, like those little tiny things matter a lot more in Premier. In Twin Suns, paying 1 more for a card, it's fine. A lot of those small little value losses don't matter that much. So he is a better Twin Suns leader than Premier for sure. And then we got the other base, and what are we looking at here? Collateral damage, we talked about that, so go ahead and move on from that. Watchful. Would you play this card? Maybe in like, there might be some situations, some leaders that you might use this. Probably not, though. Probably not. I'm just going to be honest. Attack from all sides again. High Wind Assailants. Hey, 5 for a 5/5 Sentinel. You can't really complain about that in Villainy, so you can put them in any Villainy deck. Definitely more useful on a card than they were in the TV show, I'll say that. Gorn Contractor, but we've got the Hyperspace art this time. I really like the colors on this card. Milodon Rider again. Deveronian Doorbuster. So this is kind of like the Toydarian Technician. They both have the Restore. The Technician has the Raid 1 and a 2-3 stat line. This has a 3-2 stat line and Saboteur. They're both very similar cards. Different colors, obviously. But yeah, this is just strong as a play in Twin Suns just because it has the Restore. I would say the Technician's probably stronger than this, but Saboteur, just because the Technician has one more health, but Saboteur is a good keyword. So it does make this card matter more in the late game. Season Tracker, kind of similar to that other Bounty Hunter with Hidden. You maybe would play it in those scenarios, mostly probably in a Boba deck that just wants all the Bounty Hunters. Like, you just need to play as many Bounty Hunters as possible. Now, as they make more Bounty Hunters, cards like this go to the wayside because it's just not doing enough. But I love Ithorians. I love Ithorians. They're so cool. And it's rare you see Ithorians in, like, armor in Star Wars. And I appreciate that they chose an Ithorian for this card. Unmarked credits. This card is definitely, I would say, it's weird. This card, I think in some control decks that are wanting to go late game, decks where it's like there's some key turns, they're trying to do some combo or something. Think about, like, when I was saying if you wanted to set up, like, in one of my shorts, my recent shorts, you wanted to set up HK47 with a single reactor ignition. That is 10 resources. That's kind of hard to do, depending on the types of decks in the game at that moment. But if you're making credits, you can save those credits, and so that means you could do that. Like, you have 3 credits, it means you could do it on 7 resources. That's a lot more manageable. So that's where a card like this comes into play. Outside of that, yeah, you don't really play it. But hey, speaking of unmarked credits, whoa, we got the Hyperfoil. Yeah. All right. The Tree Remembers is a great premier sideboard card for pilot leaders that are deploying in like 3 cost or less ships. And it's actually not bad in Twin Suns as well, because you are wanting to, because pilot leaders are pretty strong in Twin Suns. Pilot leaders, they provide a lot of, they usually get stats that are just harder to deal with than normal leaders on the ground. And space is still less contested generally in Twin Suns games. So this is still a decent card, especially in a control deck, because if Luke flips on his red 5, this just deletes it, and that is huge. So I think this is still a strong card in Twin Suns. But it is meta dependent. Midrim Sharpshooter, kind of understated, and paying 1 to have an opponent discard a card from their hand. That's not the type of effect you're looking for in Twin Suns. The only redeeming factor about him is that he's Saboteur and has Underworld, but outside of that, you don't play him. Secret Battle of Pretend, 2 to exhaust a friendly unit. If you do for each different aspect it has, exhaust an enemy unit in the same arena. This is potentially an interesting card. I just think it's a little bit too situational. Maybe as the game goes on, more multi-aspect cards come into play and decks get a bit more refined, you could see a card like this, because like if you have like a, maybe this is a bad example because he doesn't have yellow in his colors, but let's say you had a Paz Vizsla on the field. He's got Heroic, Command, and Vigilance. You play Secret Battle of Pretend, you exhaust 3 units for 2 resources. Compare that to like Bog Down and Procedure, where you pay 3 resources and you exhaust 1 unit or 2 if you disclose another Cunning card, I believe. I think it's Cunning. I think it's just 1 Cunning aspect. Anyway, so this with a Paz Vizsla is definitely better than Bog Down and Procedure, but Bog Down and Procedure is much easier to fulfill. So I would say this is still worse than Bog Down and Procedure, but yeah, I mean, I guess. I don't know. It requires the unit on the field. It's better than Bog Down and Procedure if you have a unit on the field that's both heroic and another aspect, or like, 2 aspects. Yeah, I could see it. I could see it. Sebulba's Pod Racer! Unfortunately, without other discard synergies, this card is not something you play in Twin Suns that much. However, this card is good. This card is good if you are pairing it with a discard leader that you can discard on demand and a pilot leader. So think like Sebulba and Pilot Vader, being able to have this, deploy Pilot Vader on it, attack for 8, discard a card from your deck with the Sebulba leader ability, ready the Pod Racer again, attack for another 8. That is a lot of damage. So this does have a spot. It's just that I don't know why you would play a Sebulba leader in Twin Suns right now. I think you would need a lot more cards to make this worth it. But in the future, an ability like this, being able to ready a vehicle, especially with pilot leaders, yeah, that's good. So it depends on the card pool as the game goes forward. Those were my packs. I was definitely happy for some of the hyperfoils. And I am looking forward to opening some Ashes of the Empire packs once I go to my pre-release. So, thank you very much for watching. We'll do some more pack openings in the future. Make sure that if you want to keep up with this content, look at all these cards. If you want to keep up with this content, make sure to UTINNI, take the initiative to hit that like and subscribe button. Thank you very much, and I'll see you in the next video.